Hey guys, Jim over here at JP Property Consulting. So today's quick tip video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to title this video, Say This, Not That. So we're going to go over some things you should be saying or wording things in a particular way to keep yourself out of trouble and to not misconstrue things and make it sound like you're trying to say something that you really aren't. So let's first start with some marketing and leasing tactics that we talk about in my marketing and leasing classes. One of the things I teach everybody to do is to kind of soften up your marketing and soften up your advertising practices by stop saying the words tenant and complex. Instead of referring to this as a complex or an apartment building, refer to this as a apartment community or as this community. It softens it up a little bit easier and a little bit nicer, and it makes it sound a little bit better in your ads. And when you're talking to people over the phone or in person, you refer to this as a community, not necessarily a complex. Same thing with your tenants. Instead of calling them your tenants, in your ads and your advertising, refer to them as your residents, not necessarily your tenants. It just sounds a little bit nicer, softens up your marketing and your advertising wordage, and just makes things sound a little bit nicer. So, for example, you want to say things like, our residents enjoy a beautiful picnic area in the back, or our residents enjoy their own private washer and dryer in their unit, in their apartment homes. And again, we'll talk, that's another one too, is calling it their apartment homes, not necessarily just simply an apartment or in this unit. Refer to it as their apartment home. And that, again, it helps you soften up that marketing and that advertising wording that you put in your ads. Now, speaking of your ads, one of the things that we're always taught over at the large apartment communities, the big property management companies, is that we are very careful on how you refer to things, such as when you walk up to your building and you got to put the key in the door and turn the key in order for the door to open. And then now the door opens. That is called, and we refer to that as, I hope you're not saying a secure building. Do not ever infer that this is simply a secure building or you're going to be safe and secure here simply because you got to put a key in that door and turn the key for the door to open. You want to refer to that to keep yourself out of any liability trouble in the future or any misconceptions. You want to refer to this as what that objectively is. That is a locked entrance. It's a locked lobby. It's an intercom entry system. It's a key fob entry system, whatever that is. But you don't want to ever simply infer that because you got to put a key in that door and open the door, that you're going to be safe and secure here, that this means the building is safe and secure. You also don't want to tell people this is a safe neighborhood. You don't want to be assuring anybody's safety and security. So when they ask you things like, how safe is this neighborhood? Or how safe is this area? Is this a safe building? You want to refer them to the local police department and let them talk with them about the neighborhood in general, rather than ever assuring them that they're going to be safe and secure here. That's just to kind of cover yourself and keep yourself out of any liability later on in case something does ever happen to them. You don't want to ever be assuring anybody their security or their safety at your property. Now, along that line as well, to kind of give you a little bit of a story, back in the day, we were at one of my apartment communities that I worked at many years ago. We were replacing the cameras in our fitness center. And in doing so, we were talking with the ADT or the Brinks guy or whoever it was that was the salesman that was showing us the new cameras that they were going to be putting down into our fitness center for our residents. And one of the leasing agents had talked to someone and they overheard them saying something like, oh, we're getting new security cameras putting in our fitness center. And that Brinks or ADT salesman, whoever it was back then, kind of stopped and said, hold on, don't talk like that. That's not what you have here. Now, and how he kind of explained it to us, and I may have this a little bit mixed up, but how he explained it to us was, if you have a system where somebody comes to you and they say, I got beat up in your parking lot last night, and your response is, oh, let me go back and take a look at the video. I'm going to go and hit the rewind button on that VHS tape and take a look and see what happens. The way that they explained that to us was, those are surveillance cameras, not security cameras. In other words, that recording device up there is not here for the purpose of keeping you safe and secure. It's here for surveillance purposes, to take video and have video surveillance of activity. If you had something where, let's say, there was, let's go back to the parking lot incident, and there's a guy sitting there watching a whole bunch of TV monitors, and he sees someone on the TV monitor hiding behind the bushes, and he kind of go like those one of these and says, "Hey, there's a guy hiding behind the bushes. He's about to go jump out at that woman and coming out of her car. Call the police," kind of thing. So it's more real time, of what's going on right now. That's what they would refer to as security cameras. So whichever one you have, be sure you're talking to your camera provider company if that's what you have, and be sure you're telling people you have what it is that you really have. Don't be giving them some sort of false sense of security by telling them you have this when you really have that. Okay, so double check with your camera company, your surveillance or security camera company, and make sure that you are referring to those recording devices or those camera devices properly as to what they really are before you tell someone you have something. Okay? Now, with regard to your signage around your property, or even in your rules and regulations or your lease, your lease packages, make sure you're not saying things that are incriminating to yourself. You want to. I've walked into properties before where I had taken over as the manager and walked into the laundry room, and the first thing I saw was a signage in the laundry room. It said things like, laundry room hours are from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. or whatever. Do not overload your washers and dryers, and so on. And then it said, children may not play in the laundry room. Okay. Now, you're hearing that and going, well, duh, I don't want kids playing in the laundry room either, right? Okay. But I want you to look at this not from your and my perspective. I know what you meant by that. You know what you meant by that. Right? That HUD agent that's shopping you, that reads that sign, or that person that's out there trying to play gotcha with you, and they read that sign, they know very well what you meant by that, right? But they're looking at that saying, well, so what are you saying? Is it okay if an adult plays in the laundry room? Right? You don't want anybody playing. It's no one can play in the laundry room. Look, you don't want me riding my bicycle up and down the hallway either, up and down the stairwell either, right? So make sure your rules and regulations and your signage around your property reflect as such. So anytime you ask yourself, is this okay if I can do this? Take the words children out of that sentence and replace it with any other protected class, if you will, right? And say, is it okay if I said, Asians cannot play in the laundry room, right? Of course not, right? You wouldn't say that. So at the same time, don't incriminate yourself by saying things like that you don't really mean. What you really mean is no one can play in the laundry room. Then say that. So one of the things that we talk about is I teach in my classes is say what you mean. And what you meant is no one can be riding their bicycles up and down the hallway. So make sure your rules and regulations aren't talking like that. Okay, go back and look at your paperwork and make sure you're not saying things like that. Now, also, a lot of times when you're talking to prospective residents, a question you ask them is, do you have any pets? And if they say no, right, I don't have any pets, and then they come in on move-in day with Fido, and Fido's their emotional support dog, right? Or they come in with a seeing eye dog. That's not legally necessarily a pet. That is an animal. That is an extension of the person. That is a tool. And it's not considered a pet legally, and we can't charge pet fees for that, right? So when you talk to them about their animals or their dogs or cats, and you want to know what they have other than other human beings in their apartment, you need to be asking them specifically, are there any animals that will be living in the apartment with you? Not necessarily pets, because pets can just simply encompass the cat and the dog and what we're used to knowing. But an animal will encompass everything, whether it be a seeing eye dog or it be an emotional support animal or so on. So make sure your questions, and especially your application paperwork, which is the legal document they're going to be filling out and answering the questions on there, make sure your application paperwork says, will there be any animals living in the apartment home with you, not necessarily just pets. Also, when you're doing your application processing procedures, we talk about this in my application processing procedure class. Be sure that when you're talking to people over the phone and when you're speaking to people in person, that you specify to them that you are going to be doing an income verification, not necessarily an employment verification. So you want to say income verification, not employment, because you don't want to infer that simply that you're checking to see that this is an able-bodied individual that can get up and go to work every day, right? If you don't want to put the image out there that you're going to decline them because they're not employed, that you're checking to see that they have a job. That's not necessarily what you're doing. You want to make sure that they have verifiable, sustainable, legal, current income that meets your screening criteria. Meaning, is it 3.5 times the rent, or 4 times the rent, or 3 times the rent, whatever your screening criteria says. So you need to make sure that you're telling everybody you're going to do an income verification, not an employment verification. And lastly, when you're checking identification, or when you have it in writing, especially if you have your screening criteria, hopefully you're watching my other videos and you have learned to have your screening criteria in writing, that one of your criteria is that they need to provide you with valid identification, right? But I want you to make sure you're not just saying valid identification or need to provide identification. You want to make sure that you want a U.S. government issued photo identification, a valid current U.S. photo identification. All of those things need to be listed so that it's not, don't say driver's license, because not again, everybody does not drive. And that could infer that you're going to decline somebody because they are handicapped and they don't drive. So you want to make sure that you're not talking to people saying, we need a copy of your driver's license. You want a copy of a valid U.S. government issued photo identification. Not something, so again, that way they're not going to come in with their college ID that could be altered by their buddy in college who works in the identification department or what have you. You want to ask for a valid U.S., not from some other country, because you want to make sure that unless you want ICE knocking at your door, right? You want to make sure that they are a valid U.S. citizen, and they're going to present you with a valid U.S. government issued photo identification that is current and valid. So make sure your screening criteria says that, and that you tell that to people in that fashion. Those are some list of things that I want to make sure that you're saying things properly to people, so that you're not getting yourself in trouble, or you're not putting yourself into a bad situation by saying things that you really don't mean. Hope that was helpful to you guys. If you found that helpful, I have a whole bunch of classes on fair housing. I got a class on fair housing off my website. I've got one on marketing and leasing practices and techniques that we teach our leasing agents over at the big management companies and the large apartment communities. I've got one on I'm losing my mind now, on application processing procedures, and one on just general property operations of once that resident has now moved in, and that day and beyond, and how you can do things to help operate that property and keep them coming back every year for renewals. So again, hope this was helpful. If you like that, go check out my website and look at my classes I have to offer, jppropertyconsulting.com. And again, thank you guys for watching. Hope you like and subscribe, and I will come back with more videos for you later on. Thank you.